Greetings, students. So we've spent a whole semester studying logic. What a long, strange trip it's been. Or rather, what a short, strange trip it's been, given this format we've been forced to use in light of the pandemic. And I wanted to thank you for this course. Because if there were no students, there'd be no teachers. And I've been very glad to be your teacher this semester and to get to know you a little bit, even in this strange medium that the pandemic has forced upon us. So let's think a little bit about what we've learned together. Now, if you think about it, nothing seems more natural than for people to argue with each other. Not in the sense of debating, but in the sense of being constantly given reasons for what we're doing and to show others that there are reasons for what we're doing so that they could accept them or reject them. We're always arguing, presenting reasons for what we want for breakfast, what movie we should watch in the coming night, what course we should take next semester, which politician we should vote for in the coming election, which Star Wars movie is the best. We all know it's The Return of the Jedi, but people do like to argue about that. We seem to swim in a sea of speech, with people just arguing and talking, or to use another metaphor, it's like we find ourselves in a jungle full of beautiful howling argument monkeys who won't shut up. Now, what if we couldn't really tell when one thing really followed from another, whether an argument made sense or not? Because what is often passed off in our daily conversations here in the howling monkey jungle of argument isn't really real arguments, as you've learned. Often we'll find people thinking that if P then Q, and Q means P, or that all A or B means all B or A. And we've learned to pay attention to those patterns. Because what we want are good arguments, ones that will preserve the truth, what logicians call truth-preserving arguments, ones that'll help us, if we've got true premises, come to a true conclusion. And we want ways to be sure we're not being fooled by others, or even worse, that we're fooling ourselves, right? We don't want to fool ourselves. I can't think of anything worse than making myself ignorant. So logic at its core is the study of truth-preserving arguments and of finding out the ways those arguments can go wrong so that we don't fool ourselves or others in our logos. And our species has quite the history with this. We are the creatures who love to find patterns and to make patterns and remake them and retell them and reorganize them and weave them up and tear them down and weave them again and make new patterns that we can tell to each other. And in our culture, if we go back to ancient Greece, where we have the beginnings of logic, mathematics, and philosophy, we find the suggestion that this human ability to experience sameness and difference and to see the patterns of what is same and what is different and to retell them and recount them to each other is what makes us distinctively human. Remember Aristotle's proposition or claim that we started with at the beginning of the semester. Among all the animals, the human being is the living creature that has the logos. And this ability to reason ranges from the ability to recognize with Helen Keller that everything has a name to all the bodies of knowledge humans have built up, ranging from mathematics, physics, chemistry, psychology, computer science, you name it. It all depends on our ability to think in this basic way. And in fact, the computer I typed this lecture upon could not have been made without the logical notions that we've studied being encoded into the very wires and current flow of our computer. Think about it in terms of your daily life, beginning, of course, with being able to tell that WATER means any instance of that glorious wet stuff we call agua, Wasser, or quite simply water, or maybe H2O. Reasoning is quite simply a basic natural activity, which you of course perform well or not so well. But still, that's what you're doing. So it would be mistaken to argue that, look, humans aren't rational animals. Look at how often our reasoning goes wrong. But that's just it. We are reasoning, even when we reason poorly. That is the paradigm we operate under. Every time you solve a problem, make a decision, or try to get at the truth of some matter, you are reasoning, or trying to reason. The evidence for this is that at any time in such circumstances of life, if someone were to ask you, why are you doing this? You would naturally try to respond with reasons for why you're doing what you do. Think of confronting a small child after you hear a tremendous shattering noise in the kitchen, and you rush in to find a broken cookie jar all over the floor, and the child with a cookie in their hand. Why did you break the cookie jar? I didn't mean to break it. I just wanted a cookie. The child has begun to reason. If you think about it, life for human beings is a continuous process of making decisions, solving problems, and trying to find things out. And all around you, everyone else is doing the same thing. You're born into a society of reasoning creatures who then proceed to judge you and grade you on how well you participate in this seemingly endless process. You are swimming in an ocean of reasoning from the day you were born. Again, that doesn't mean that you're swimming in an ocean of good reasoning. Often it is poor reasoning, but it's reasoning after all. And it can be so vital to us that we might begin to see that those who will not reason with us are threats that can cause more problems, from the small to the catastrophic. Just think about the amount of reasoning that needs to go into the organization of simply a city's water and power supply, or its fire department, or its police department, or in how to handle disasters. Just think of the current pandemic, in fact, and how we have instances both of people listening to the Logos and not listening to it in dealing with it, and how clearly we have what we've called the idiotes, the private people who refuse to look at the broad general patterns of things, and the sophos, those who do see the broad general patterns, right? Like we have the epidemiologists, those who know the Logos of epidemics, and then we have those who listen to those who know the Logos of epidemics, who see the broad general patterns of epidemics and how they operate, and then we have the idiotes locked into their private worlds who refuse to listen to the knowledge that the Sophos brings of these things, and the kind of catastrophic results that can occur when this happens. If we think of human history and we look at all that's gone through it, I sometimes think either human beings on the whole will learn to listen to the Logos, or we will simply perish. So we focused on arguments in this course as a sort of basic unit of reasoning, learning what arguments are composed of, propositions expressed in statements, and began to focus on one way we can combine these propositions to give arguments so that we can evaluate them. The way we focused on can be traced back to those pesky Greeks, and in particular to Aristotle and his categorical logic. Now, Aristotle also came up with what have come to be known as the 3 laws of thought, or the 3 laws of rational thinking. If we think about anything, Aristotle said, for it to make sense when we talk about it and with each other, there are sort of 3 constraints that we must recognize to reason properly. So here are Aristotle's 3 laws of rational thought. The first is called the principle of identity. Whatever is, is. The second, the principle of non-contradiction. Nothing can both be and not be. And 3, the principle of the excluded middle. Everything must either be or not be. Now these sound very simple, but they're very profound, and they structure all reasonable acts of thinking and discourse. So let's think about each of these principles in turn and what they mean. Right? First, the principle of identity. Whatever is, is. One must be able to say, if a thing is A, then it is A. Now this means that everything is the same as itself, which means that whatever is said of something will remain true of it as long as it remains the same. And traditionally we have examples like this to illustrate this. People will say A equals A. Or if it's a dog, then it's a dog. And if Jim lives in St. Petersburg, then it's true that Jim lives in St. Petersburg. The second law is the principle of non-contradiction. Nothing can both be and not be. You must be able to say, if a thing is A, then it is not non-A. Now, this means that nothing can both exist and not exist at the same time and in the same respect, which means no statement is both true and false at the same time. In our examples, A is not equal to non-A. If it's a dog, then it's not a non-dog. And if Jim lives in St. Petersburg, then it is not true that Jim does not live in St. Petersburg. And then we have the principle of the excluded middle. Everything must either be or not be. You must be able to say a thing is either A or it's non-A. And this means that something either exists or it doesn't, which means that every statement is either true or false, as we've learned to say that it has truth value. Our examples, well, either A or non-A. It's either a dog or it's non-dog. Either Jim lives in St. Petersburg or Jim doesn't live in St. Petersburg. Now these laws take effect anytime we speak or think, and are especially applicable when we enter the public space of reasoning and logical analysis that we call listening to the logos. The instant intuition descends into the logos, the three laws are present, though there are really three different ways to say the same thing, if you think about it. And I'll leave that with you as a sort of Zen koan for you to meditate on. Now, people will try to make statements contrary to these three laws, but they fail as soon as they claim to speak intelligibly. As soon as I claim nothing, for example, is known or knowable, I contradict myself, make my claim meaningless, because a claim about the non-existence or impossibility of knowledge as such must be admitted to be itself a claim of knowledge. To deny all claims to knowledge is to deny your very own claim that you can't make claims to knowledge. If I say nothing is true, then I will simply ask you, is your statement that nothing is true or false? If it's true that nothing is true, then you've made a true statement, which means your claim is also false at the same time, and you've contradicted yourself, and you've not said anything intelligible at all, and you have effectively sawn off the limb you're sitting on in your tree. Or do you claim that nothing is certain, but you have refuted yourself, since you have now claimed that one thing at least is certain, that nothing is certain? Or are you not even certain that you're not certain? But that would mean you're certain that you're not certain that you're certain. Or suppose you claim that everything should be doubted. But should I doubt the claim that everything should be doubted or not? Right? You begin to see how this sort of thing works when you try to escape the three laws of rational thinking. Remember also, in everything else we've done, we've focused on Aristotle's great insight that logic is concerned with form and not content. We've focused on the core practice of this type of thinking, which is found in the recognition of logical form, to be able to tell when any particular argument is an instance of a certain logical form. And this teaches us the value of abstraction. An argument form is an abstraction, a pattern abstracted from the particular argument, just like the water was abstracted from water. When we do this, studying an argument's form after it has been abstracted from the natural language, we can see things about it we might not have seen otherwise if we left it in place in the natural language. By studying these abstracted logical forms, we can see things about how they fit together and relate to each other that we couldn't easily see otherwise. And so this focus on abstracted form gives us the title of formal logic. In doing this, we are still making that old human move from particular to universal, from instance to form, from concrete to abstract, in this case abstracting from the particular elements of the arguments that make them unique, to looking instead at what they hold in common with other instances, the features all arguments of that type share in common. Remember the words of Heraclitus we began the semester with, of listening to the Logos. When we think in the sense of listening to the Logos, we move out of the dreams of the slumbering idiotes who wander in their own private worlds, not seeing the common patterns that cut across the great, wide-awake world of reasoning. Listen to Heraclitus with me again, one more time. Of the Logos, which is as I describe it, human beings always prove to be uncomprehending, both before they have heard it and when once they have heard it. For although all things happen according to this Logos, human beings are like people of no experience, even when they experience such words and deeds as I explain, when I distinguish each thing according to its constitution and declare how it is. But the rest of the human beings fail to notice what they do after they wake up, just as they forget what they do when asleep. To those who are awake, there is one ordered universe common to all, whereas in sleep, each turns away from the world to one of their own. Therefore it is necessary to follow the common. But although the Logos is common, the many live as though they had a private understanding. So listening not to me, but to the Logos, it's wise to agree. Yes, think for yourself. Listen to the Logos for yourself and see what claims are true or not, where the argument forms take you, and how they guide your life in a reasonable way or not. Listening not to me, but to the Logos, it would be wise to agree. Thank you for your very kind attention.